Georges St-Pierre was fresh off of the biggest win of his career. The man who is now largely considered the greatest welterweight in UFC history had just dethroned the long-reigning, dominant champion, Matt Hughes. Matt Hughes was famous for taking out opponents in less than a round. And not only had Georges St-Pierre, also known as GSP, beaten him, he had finished Hughes by technical knockout within 2 rounds. GSP, the new welterweight champion, was already being viewed by many as possibly the single greatest fighter of all time. GSP's next opponent, Matt Serra, wasn't even a ranked contender. Serra had spent his entire career in the middle of the pack. In fact, the only reason he had a title shot now was because he'd won a tournament called The Comeback, where they'd placed him up against all of the other burned out and washed up fighters in the division for one last crack at the title before the end of their careers. This was a literal David and Goliath story with Matt Serra. I've met Matt Serra. He stands about this high. He looks like the Lucky Charms leprechaun without the hair. And GSP stands about this high. 6 inches of reach advantage, 6 inches longer in the arms. This was considered nothing more than a tune-up for GSP. This was an easy win, sure to be over in less than a round. But that ain't how it played out, although it was certainly over within a round. Just 3 minutes into the fight, Serra, the much smaller fighter, connected with an overhand right that he practically had to jump into that sent GSP stumbling. And that overhand right was followed up with a flurry that sent GSP to the canvas. Now, St-Pierre struggled and he fought and he flailed on the ground trying to protect himself, but Serra just rained down shot after shot until eventually GSP rolled over and tapped out, gave up due to strikes. Just like that, the new welterweight king was dethroned, not only defeated, but having quit due to punches. Now, for those of you who don't follow fighting, well, there aren't many things that can make a fighter look bad, because what other sane person would stand in a cage with another professional athlete and let them hit them? If there's one thing that's considered shameful in the UFC, it's tapping due to strikes. And while GSP would quickly regain his title and would go the rest of his career without facing another defeat, just like that, he'd gone from the greatest victory to his most humiliating defeat. This morning, where we pick up in the story of Israel, it is in many ways a GSP, Matt Serra kind of story. Israel has just come off of the greatest military victory their nation has ever known. With God at their side, they've watched as the walls of Jericho have crumbled to the ground. They've not just defeated, but utterly destroyed their enemy and staked their claim of the promised land. They are on top of the world. But from their greatest victory, they're about to face their most humiliating defeat. If you have your Bibles would you please turn with me to Joshua 7, verses 1 through 12. Again, Joshua 7, 1 through 12. We'll be bringing it up on the screens as well. For the last 5 weeks, we've been going through this series, Between the Waters, where we've continued the story of Israel that we started over a year ago now. Israel, who left Egypt, who left their slavery through the parted waters of the Red Sea, and who entered into God's promise through the parted waters of the Jordan. Week 1, we looked at the story of the 12 Israelite spies and how they discouraged God's people from entering into the promise. And from that story, we learned that part of seeking God's promise together is speaking God's promise over one another. It's giving each other the courage to pursue him. Week 2, we read the story of Moses and how he brought water from the rock by smashing it with a stick, how he disobeyed God by showing rage instead of grace in the way that he was representing God. And it was this reminder for us that as ambassadors for Christ, as a priesthood of all believers, we have a responsibility. Everything that we do and say represents the God that we follow, and so may we represent him well. Week 3, we read Joshua 1, and we looked at God's pep talk for Joshua and the nation of Israel before they received the promise. how they were to go together in unity, how they were to go forward, and how they were to go with him courageously, trusting that he would be by their side no matter what. Last week, Pastor Hallie preached, and she showed me up again. Isn't that kid phenomenal? We are so blessed to have her in our church. She shared the story of the crumbling walls of Jericho and how God led Israel to this great victory, and how from that victory they learned a deeper trust in him. And this week, after many big steps forward into the promise, after many great victories, we see Israel take a big stutter step backwards into defeat. We read the story in Joshua 7, 1 through 12, which says, "But the Israelites were unfaithful in regard to the devoted things. Achan, son of Carmi, the son of Zimri, the son of Zerah of the tribe of Judah, took some of them. So the Lord's anger burned against Israel. Now, Joshua sent men from Jericho to Ai, which is near Beth Aven to the east of Bethel, and told them, 'Go up and spy out the region.' So the men went up and spied out Ai. When they returned to Joshua, they said, 'Not all the army will have to go up against Ai. Send 2,000 or 3,000 men to take it, and do not weary the whole army, for only a few people live there.' So about 3,000 went up, but they were routed by the men of Ai, who killed about 36 of them. They chased the Israelites from the city gate as far as the stone quarries and struck them down on the slopes. At this, the hearts of the people melted in fear and became like water. Then Joshua tore his clothes and fell face down to the ground before the ark of the Lord, remaining there till evening. The elders of Israel did the same and sprinkled dust on their heads. And Joshua said, 'Alas, sovereign Lord, why did you ever bring this people across the Jordan to deliver us into the hands of the Amorites to destroy us? If only we had been content to stay on the other side of the Jordan. Pardon your servant, Lord. What can I say now that Israel has been routed by its enemies? The Canaanites and the other people of the country will hear about this, and they will surround us and wipe out our name from the earth. What then will you do for your own great name?' The Lord said to Joshua, 'Stand up. What are you doing down on your face? Israel has sinned. They have violated my covenant, which I commanded them to keep. They have taken some of the devoted things. They have stolen. They have lied. They have put them with their own possessions. That is why the Israelites cannot stand against their enemies. They turn their backs and run because they have been made liable to destruction. I will not be with you anymore unless you destroy whatever among you is devoted to destruction.'" The Israelites were on top of the world with the greatest military victory in their entire history. They feel like champions as they step into Ai, a much smaller, much weaker enemy, so much so that they've just brought a small regiment rather than an army to fight. And just like GSP with Matt Sarah, their smaller enemy has utterly humiliated them. They've tapped out due to strikes, they've turned tail and run with 36 men dead. And what follows to me is one of the more difficult stories in all of Scripture, as we find that it was Achan's sin that led to their downfall. As because of this one man's sin, God has left Israel to their own devices. It was Achan's sin that led to the deaths of 36 men and would eventually, after this passage, lead to Achan being put to death himself. So, as we dive in here, I'll start by saying my tendency, my predisposition is to want to avoid this passage because this is a hard passage. It says difficult things that don't easily reconcile with the God of love and grace that I preach. That one man's sin led to the destruction of many and led to him being put to death himself for his action, and that this was a part of God's will. That's hard to grapple with. And so I'll also start by saying, if this is your first time with us, I promise you we're not like a hellfire and brimstone church. We're not going to beat you over the head with a bonk stick or anything like that. This is what my theology professor in college would call a naughty passage. I hate that language. It sounds like a small child. Naughty passages are passages that don't necessarily fit in with what we understand about who God is. But they're there. Whether we like it or not, these passages are a part of the infallible Word of God. So we don't really have the option of just ignoring it, right? We can't cross it out or cut it out of the Bible. It's there. And if we as pastors only ever talk about the easy and encouraging things, even though that's what I would like to do, we leave people to wrestle with the difficult things on their own without guidance. I think that's why it's important for me to talk about this kind of stuff, you know? Does that feel okay with you? Can I talk about hard things for a moment? Ooh, I got an amen. You always give me an amen. I love you, Dave. The good news is, this is a passage that, even though it's difficult, also leads us to the foot of the cross and reminds us of our need for a Savior. And so if, as we're talking, like, oh, this feels hard, stick with me because there is something beautiful on the other side. So what's going on here? Why is all this happening? One man sins, 36 people dead, and then that man's put to death. I think that a lot of what's happening here has to do with the nature of God and the nature of sin. I think that all of it, while it is a difficult story for them, again, is a beautiful precursor to the gospel. So first, let's take a look at the nature of sin. And in particular, let's take a look at the sin that Achan has committed. To help us understand, we're going to read a command that God gave just a chapter before this as he prepared Israel to conquer Jericho. We read the words that he spoke to his people in Joshua 6:17 through 19, which say, "The city and all that is in it are to be devoted to the Lord. Only Rahab the prostitute and all who are with her in her house shall be spared, because she hid the spies we sent. But keep away from the devoted things so that you will not bring about your own destruction by taking any of them. Otherwise, you will make the camp of Israel liable to destruction and bring trouble on it. All the silver and gold and the articles of bronze and iron are sacred to the Lord and must go into his treasury." Okay, so now we know, we've defined these devoted things. What Achan took, it's not just plunder from an enemy nation. These were things that were dedicated and devoted to God. Achan didn't pilfer and plunder. Achan stole. He didn't just steal from anybody. He stole from God. Like, we're going to emphasize the power of God. This isn't just G-O-D God. This is capital G-A-W-D, God. He stole from God. Imagine for just a second, thank you for the giggle, Jen, you're amazing. Imagine for just a second, we're sitting in church, we're worshiping our hearts out, the worship team is playing, Tim's doing a with his angelic voice, and the offering plate is being passed, and you're singing your lungs off, lungs off, lungs out. Out of the corner of your eye, you see a person singing, hands raised, swaying. But when the plate reaches them, they do a quick glance around, check to see if anybody's looking, and then grabs a fistful of money and stuffs it in their pocket and passes the plate along. First off, may we give grace upon grace in every situation. If somebody steals from me, my wife, my family, or my church family, may my first response be to share grace, where my heart goes out to the person, wondering what kind of situation they're in, just as much as my desire for justice exists. But let me also say that even outside of the church, for people who want nothing to do with Jesus, stealing from a church offering plate feels like a really low kind of low, you know? I know people who are atheists who still give to a church. I have a good friend. He donates to a church every now and then, and he says essentially, like, I believe in the mission of the church, but also if I'm wrong, I'm kind of trying to hedge my bets here. Give God the money. To steal from a church, to steal from God is frowned upon by pretty much everybody. In this passage, Achan has stolen from God. Not only has he stolen from God, but he has stolen from God literally right after God asked him not to. You stole from me when I asked you not to? In this passage that we just read, God spelled out, do not do this. Do not take these things, or this you will fail will happen. He told him exactly what was going to go down. This feels less harsh when you know that's what he said. That was the consequence. I don't feel bad for screaming at my dog when he knows he's not supposed to stand on the table and he does it anyways. For Achan to take these devoted things is not just a sin of action, but it's a sin of attitude. It's a sin of the heart because it is that blatant kind of defiance. It takes things a step further because, have you ever felt defied? Do you know what that feeling is? You ever have that moment with your kid, your dog? Let's take a moment. Let's all step there. Let's say I see a family looking at each other. Originally, I was going to call this kid Jimmy. We're going to call him Nathan, I think. I'm just kidding, Nathan. We love you, man. Let's call him Jimmy. Jimmy is always testing you. It's an hour before bedtime. You're sitting in the living room watching the TV when all of a sudden, the lights start to flicker. Sure enough, Jimmy's at it again, hovering by the light switch, just going nuts. Click, 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 click. Jimmy! You call out from the couch. How many times do I have to tell you? Don't flick the light switch like that. Little Jimmy looks you in the eye. Hovering by that light switch, lights start to flicker again as he flips it. Click, 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 click. Jimmy! Don't even touch it! You say in the parent voice that strikes terror in the heart of every child except for your own. And then Jimmy, without saying a word, unwavering, unflinching, unblinking, staring at you with a slight half smile forming at the corner of his lips, extends his index finger and slowly pokes the light switch before flicking again. Click, 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 click. Oh man, I tell you what, we've talked about that little dog, Dublin. I feel this one with a deep passion because of the number of times I find him with things that belong to me, that he knows belong to me, that he got off of a counter that he shouldn't be up on. Looking me in the eye while chewing on my favorite things. These are the moments. These are the moments when it comes to raising our children or our puppies that Claire loves for some reason. They're some of the most deeply frustrating. Because at this point, the child's doing it intentionally, right? They know it's an act of rebellion. This is an instance where it's not that they don't know any better because they do. This is an instance that isn't a momentary slip up. Jimmy knew the right thing to do, and he knew the wrong thing, and he chose the wrong thing in spite of you. He chose the wrong thing because he knew it was wrong. Achan is the Jimmy in this story. God has just told him not to do this, and he unwaveringly does it. This is a pure act of rebellion. There's a severity to this sin because it's a blatant, hand held high in the air to God kind of defiance. He knows it's wrong, and he does it anyways. Why does he do it? And I think the more difficult question we might want to grapple with is, why do we do it? Why do we so easily and so often flick the light switch? Honestly, I think the answer is original sin. It's the sin that we are all born with. All right, Adam and Eve ate the fruit, and just like that, we all had sin. You know, my parents said this thing when I was a kid. They're like, if Adam and Eve wouldn't have just eaten that fruit. And I'm like, you mean to tell me you wouldn't have eaten the fruit? Let me tell you what, I would have been in the garden all of 12 seconds and I would have been peeling pomegranate and grapefruit out of my teeth without even thinking about it. Original sin, it's this strange thing where I think most of us have a compulsion toward the sorts of things that would destroy us. Case in point, Pastor Hallie used an illustration last week where she talked about skydiving. Anybody else ever thought about how cool it would be to skydive? Any takers? Any fast car, fast motorcycle kind of people? Billy's like, yeah. thought about the fact that skydiving is jumping out of a perfectly good plane? That's doing the job it was intended for? That's not on the ground, but in the air? All y'all who are interested in skydiving, I got one word for you: splat. I think that this is something like sin. We all have that original sin, not just that we do bad, but that our hearts want to do the things that would lead to our own destruction. Because of original sin, there are pieces of us that like what is wrong specifically because it is wrong. Most of us have that strange compulsion to poke and flick that light switch, to rebel with no reason. The nature of sin led to Achan's destruction, specifically because the nature of sin is in direct conflict with the nature of God. For Achan, his sin led to his destruction and the destruction of others. That one decision led to so much fallout, and that feels hard and that feels difficult. But when sin distances us from God, it leads to our destruction because it's the natural fallout. There's a phrase that we use anytime we share the gospel. Scripture tells us that the wages of sin is death. And in this passage, we see that wage paid not just by Achan, but by the men on the battlefield. This is a difficult passage, but this is exactly what we've been told in Scripture. Because God is holy, he is all that is good. Sin cannot stand in his presence because it is all that is bad. They are like oil and water. They cannot possibly mix. I don't know what this motion is. It felt like mixing to me, but now it's more like I'm doing the wave. Ooh, I almost fell right there. I'm going to get back on track. If sin cannot mix with God, that means that sin distances us from God. And because God is life, if sin distances us from God, if sin separates us from God, that means that sin brings about death. Death is the wage of sin. Achan, in his sin, distanced all of Israel from God, from the source of life, which led to fallout for the entire nation. And that, it seems unfair that one man's sin led to fallout for everyone, but I think that's the reality of sin. Have you ever been hurt by somebody else's sin? Has somebody else ever been hurt by your sin? The answer to both of those questions is yes. Anytime somebody steals, there is a victim. Anytime somebody lies, there is a person being lied to. Our sin, because it distances us from God, has this tendency to lead to our pain, and if left unchecked, lead to our destruction, and often leads to hurt for others. This passage is incredibly difficult, so much so that I don't really like preaching it. Because we see sin and its consequences on full display. But what feels difficult about this is also where we know hope on the other side of the cross. Because what we see with Achan, the sin that he committed and the consequences that he faced, is what we all probably deserve. But praise Jesus, he faced that for us. This is where the beauty of the gospel collides with the difficulty of the passage, in that Christ was destroyed on my behalf, hanging from a cross, and that through his sacrifice, by facing the absolute humiliation of my defeat, he paved a way to victory for me over sin and death. He paved a way for me, for us to devote ourselves to the things that would bring us life rather than the things that would bring us destruction. And as the worship team comes forward and as we move into a time of response, I think if there's an invitation of this passage, it's simply an invitation to the foot of the cross. As human beings, we all have original sin. Chances are all of us are facing a battle of some sort right now. Chances are we've all been defeated. But the invitation of this passage is to simply be reminded that the battle is already won, that Christ is the victor over sin and death, and that when he invites us to put our faith in him, he invites us to share in the victory. The invitation of this passage is to put our faith in Jesus. And this is something, right? Like every now and then we share the gospel. And I think it's really fun for those of us who are believers to think, wow, somebody might encounter Jesus for the first time today. And I think it's a good reminder for us that I think every morning I need to choose to give my life to Jesus again because I'm so stinking good at rebellion. This isn't a message that's just for newcomers. It's a message that's just as much for me because I need the grace of Jesus Christ every day, especially when that dog's standing on the counter. You know what I mean? And so what we're going to do right now, we're going to bow our heads in prayer. We're going to say a simple prayer in faith. God, I receive your life. I give my life to you. I turn from sin. I turn toward you. If you want to pray that prayer along with me, you're more than welcome. When all is said and done, whether you've prayed that for the first time or the 1,000th, I'm not going to ask anybody to raise their hands or put themselves on the spot, but I will ask you, turn and share with somebody and celebrate the victory that you have in Jesus. Turn and share on the phone too. You don't got to do it in church right away. Let's bow our heads. Let's pray. Let's give ourselves to God. Heavenly Father, I confess to you that I am a sinner in need of your grace. My actions have separated me from you. I no longer want to live in sin. I no longer want to live in shame. God, I ask your forgiveness. I put my trust in your Son, Jesus Christ, giving my life to him, receiving his life from him. Thank you for your constant offer and gift of salvation. Thank you for the gift of your Son, Jesus. Amen. Now let's sing one more song to our beloved, precious Jesus.